Hi, everyone. Welcome to A Way of God's Remembrance with Michael Hayes. This is presented by Awake to Love. I'm Lee here with Cindy. We are the volunteer Zoom hosts and so grateful that you are here. As an introduction, I will read Michael's words to clarify the focus and the format of these weekly gatherings. This is a weekly gathering for those seeking greater awareness of their true nature. There are many paths and approaches to higher consciousness and to greater awakening to who we truly are. The essence, the truth of all these paths is more about remembering who we are and have always been, rather than becoming something different or more than we have seen ourselves to be. A way of God's remembrance goes to the heart, to the intention of all the paths. This is what we will explore each week. Michael will share thoughts and awarenesses that come forward as relevant and purposeful for our time together, followed by questions and answers related to what he shares about. We will begin with an invocation of light to help support us all to be in collective alignment. We would love for one of you to lead us in the light invocation. If you are so inspired, please would you raise your Zoom hand and Michael will select you. After the light invocation, we will play a recording to lead us in Anai Hu chanting.
Rochelle.
Thank you. Hello. Father, Mother God. My name is Rochelle, and I call us all forward into the light of the Christ. Through the order of Melchizedek, the office of the Christ, and into God. Asking only that which is for our highest goods, collectively and individually, to come forward. I am grateful. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Lee. Berush Veshen. And you. And I.
It is a beautiful day to be alive and to be sharing with each of you and to feel the presence of God, the Spirit that loves us all and that in a way lives us all, coming present. Each of us is always one with this, but we have a forgetfulness that comes upon us when we enter into this dimension of time and space. Yet there is a togetherness of God that is inherent with every part of God. And the reactivation of this togetherness brings us into a joy and brings us into a connection or connectedness that lifts us and brings a peace in us and a joy that is somewhat unfathomable, but is quite experienceable. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to share with each of you that which I have come to experience as so, but also that which I know is so for you. And when I say I know it, can I prove it? No, but I know it more than I know that I'm sitting in a chair. Because when I came into this remembrance, this awakening, it was so absolutely clear that this had always been the true reality of my life and the true reality of all existence. So God extended part of itself or elements of itself into the time and space dimension to have the experience of what it'd be like to exist in time and space with all the limitations, all the illusions, all the distractions, all the temptations. It was God's glorious journey and God's path of discovery. And each of us then became an instrument of God's discovery of itself. What a wonderful thing to do in our love of God and our willingness to do anything for God that we chose into this. And that there comes an opportunity for every being, hence the statement that not one soul will be lost, to come back into the knowing, come back into conscious awareness of this truth that we are always with God. As Jesus said, the Father and I are one. And also, as he said, these things I do, you too shall do, and even greater. And this oneness with God, this togetherness with the Father, is inherently present, not simply as a possibility, but as a truth that is in us and through us and lives us, and is activating itself more from beyond the level of potential into the level of true experience for more and more people, for more and more who are ready for this. And I've been rather delighted to find that so many people are ready to be activated into a knowing of this truth. And it's a strange thing because it's not something we know how to do as individuals. It actually comes about when we surrender to the truth that of ourselves we can't do this. As Jesus said, of myself I can do nothing. It is the Father through me doing his own work, which is another saying the Father fulfilling his own intention, who accomplishes all things, including accomplishing this activation of remembrance, this coming awake to the truth of our oneness with all that is. And the truth that we are not these bodies and we are not the story of individuality that we've been playing out for eons of time. We can have consciousness of that even as we come into the remembrance, even as we come to the knowing of God's presence. We can be conscious of the particularization of our existence in form of the remembrance that goes on here, which is remembrance of a story of my life, my attachments, my dreams, my visions, my choices, my suffering, my joys, my wins and my losses. We can simultaneously have awareness of that as we have awareness that we live and exist beyond all that. We live and exist in this truth of oneness with God and oneness with all. One with his all that God, oneness with all that God has created, but also oneness with all that is beyond creating, that is beyond creation and beyond any kind of form. For God exists in a totally unmanifest state and in a tremendously manifested condition. I'm suggesting to you that this is something you can know for yourself. You don't have to believe me in this. I don't know that I really believed it when I first heard about this idea. I just trusted the process and surrendered to it, and lo and behold, it came about as truth. There was a time with my master Jesus when there was a remembrance that took place for many. And when people think about disciples, and you'd say, how could those people have gone out and spread that message? And you look at the history, and they all, except John the Beloved, died a violent death. And he didn't die a violent death, but he was imprisoned at the end of his life on a wretched island and endured very harsh treatment. But all the other of the known disciples or the named disciples, there was a lot more than just those guys. They all died violent deaths. And, it wouldn't have really been a mystery for them as time went on. They go, hey, did you hear about what happened to that guy? Did you hear about what happened to that guy? And yet they kept all of them going, sharing the message, sharing the truth that Christ was offering. And what could give them the empowerment to do that? What gave them the empowerment to do it was this remembrance of their oneness with God. And the thing is, when you have that remembrance, the more it's tangible for you. The one thing you realize that matters to you in life more than anything else is that remembrance. And if you start making choices in your life that were in contradiction to your remembrance and taking you away from that remembrance, it would be very difficult. It would produce a kind of suffering in the consciousness that is difficult to understand because it's not a physical suffering, but it's like an ache and an emptiness that is very hard to describe, but even harder to endure. And I've had that emptiness at times as I was being brought into remembrance that I would push back. The unconscious part of me would resist, try and cling to the storyline of myself as Michael in this body with these responsibilities and these attachments and these dreams and visions. And yet in the process of that, as I came sort of succumbed to it or succumbed to the pull of the story of my individuality to pull me back into that as my primary focus of life, this empty feeling would hit me. Because it wasn't the remembrance was totally gone, but I wasn't in it. It was like I was aware of it, but I was becoming more aware back into my human condition. And that became a torture. And finally I would hit a point called, I can't take this. Someday it would hit me in a day and I can't. And I'd go find a chair or a bed or something, and I would call, I'm not getting off this bed until I'm back into that remembrance. And I can remember a few times where it took a long time. I remember one time was basically 7 hours. What did I do? I meditated, I prayed, I did everything. But mostly I let go and I remind myself the truth of what I knew until suddenly I witnessed somewhere where I had let something of the story of life come between me and the truth of life. I saw what that story was and I let it go, and instantly the truth was back. It wasn't like, oh, things are starting to get better. It was just like that. Like I went from this terrible pain to this terribly great joy and peace. And I would say this could very well be what was mentioned in the Bible as a peace that surpasses understanding, because it is that true and that strong and that real. And when it's there, all the other visions and dreams and, oh, gotta have, need to, should do, all that stuff kind of just falls away. Not that there's no awareness of a responsibility of this condition, like, well, you'll have something burning on the stove, or you have dogs to feed, or you have somebody you said you would do something with. It's all in there, but the attachment to it goes. It's just like you're just looking at it like, of course I'll take care of that. But my heart and my truth and my joy is with this greater state of truth. So I talk about it and share about it, and I've known about this for quite a long time, mostly through my teacher, John Roger, and the connection to this that I got a number of years ago. But it was more one of those things I kind of shared with him, and because it just didn't seem like there was a time for it. But as time passed, I noticed more and more people ready for this, and it was starting to happen in other people, because I don't do this. The Spirit does this. But because I'm aware of it, I can support other people to be aware of it. And I felt the Spirit calling me to that. And then from the spirit world, John Roger was coming back to me and saying, it's time to do this. Not that I would do it. He said, we'll do this. The Spirit's going to do this. And so I'm just happy to be able to have all of you present to gain this. And if one of you gains it, I'm so thrilled and excited. And I've wondered at the time, will people get this? But what I'm finding is people are getting it a lot faster and easier than I did. I was slow. So, but it's just my joy to share this with you. So I think that's kind of my talk for right now. I'm going to turn it over to Lee, who's going to share with you a few of the guidelines related to sharing. And after that, we'll take some sharing, and hopefully we can have fun. But more than that, we can collectively connect more into this truth. My teacher, John Rogers, said the blessings already are. And when I heard the blessings already are, I always heard the blessings always are. And then I heard Jesus saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And I thought, this is what's always at hand. It's always so for us. Is this that time that you and I and others will take advantage of this and really claim this? Not as an ego claiming it, but the claiming of a realization of truth. Because the Spirit of God is right there offering the opportunity. So let us partake. All right, Lee.
Thank you, Michael. God bless you, Michael. Thank you, John Roger. This is guidelines for questions. Questions are about a way of God's remembrance and what Michael has shared. To ask a question, please raise your Zoom hand. You can find that by hovering near the bottom of your Zoom screen. Click on the React button. A pop-up appears. Choose Raise Hand. Please also turn on your video for full participation. If you're on a low bandwidth connection, unable to do that, so be it. Most important, since so many of us have had the blessing over so many years of Michael's assistance in clearing things, this is not that. Please do not ask questions of a personal nature, and do not ask Michael for assistance in clearing. Questions are for your benefit, the benefit of those of us gathered, and those who will participate via the archives. We ask that you look to the integrity of your intentions. before asking a question of Michael. And thank you so much. Finally, the legal consent. By raising your hand and asking questions of Michael, you are giving full consent to Awake to Love to make the audio and video of this gathering, including your sharing, available as online archives for anyone to access. Please do not raise your hand and do not share unless you are in full agreement. Thank you. Michael, some hands await you.
My goodness. All right. Kinneret.
Hi,
Hello.
good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you, sweetie.
So I have a question that will relate to what you shared, and it's something that
Okay.
I'm still confused by.
All right.
I work as a spiritual counselor at hospice. I did not grow up with Jesus as a figure in
Mm,
my life, and
mm,
I am perplexed by the phrasing, I am the way, and no one comes to the Father except through me.
mm,
And because I
mm.
work with so many people and I see how this statement divides and separates rather than go deeper, I think I'm seeking a deeper understanding of that.
What a great question. I've never pondered that, so I'll see if I have an answer. I have no idea, but it's mm. Where that problem comes in that is people tend to take that statement and look at it more as if Jesus is talking about himself as a person. So if we look at the Christ, and I know in the ancient idea of it, the Christ meant the anointed one who was chosen by God, who would be the Messiah for the people and set the people free. And I think spiritually that was all true. I think a lot of things got put on it about what that meant to be the Messiah over the many centuries, where the idea of the Messiah was there with the Jewish people. A lot of things got put in there, very similar to what I think happened with Islam, with Muhammad, because Muhammad, when he was in the spirit world, he was a very connected being, but somehow in that years towards the end of his life and stuff, a lot of other stuff got thrown in there that seems very contradictory to his message. Just like with Christianity, you go, this is the guy who talked about love, and suddenly you got churches talking about going to hell, and you got crusades, and you got inquisition. So what you see a lot of people jump in and throw their own things on it. And one of the people that came after Jesus, who Christianity relates to as an apostle, Paul, who wasn't really a student of Jesus, was actually a persecutor of the Christians, but had a conversion. The way he came to present the message of Jesus Christ was more the message of that through your faith or through your belief in Jesus, you are saved. And he wrote a lot of things suggesting that in modern Christianity kind of has grown out of that as the key thing is your faith, your belief. And it's not that faith isn't a neat thing, but the deeper messaging was always about, no, this is something you can know. And this is because if you read the Gospels, which are you would think would be the most important thing in Christianity, but they're not, because the teachings of Paul kind of became more important. But the Gospels really talk about Jesus saying, "These things I do, you too shall do, and even greater." He says, he says the Father and I one, and he says, you, and he's saying you too. So he's basically saying he's got this higher consciousness, and his higher consciousness is available to us. So this is getting a complicated answer. So the evolutionary flow on this planet, we could go back to even before the dinosaurs, was very much locked into the eye for an eye process, the law of cause and effect, or the idea of karma. You reap what you sow. And everything was operating under that principle. And the problem was that God set this all up as, in a sense, all the souls coming into all this to learn to grow and to eventually come awake and learn through the process. But the requirement of the eye for an eye was becoming so difficult. I mean, the souls were just getting bogged down in this. It was like nobody was getting out. Nobody was really finishing. Nobody's graduating, kind of thing. It was so difficult. And so there was a second option that was then instituted and brought in. And the instituting of that second option was done by God utilizing instruments of God, which would be, of course, the great angels, but also masters that came. And so if we look in the traditions, the Jewish tradition of their lineages and stuff, we could see it. Even the whole story of Adam is a story of somebody coming forward out of creation rather than out of evolution. Like God created him, he didn't evolve to that. So the whole thing of even Adam and the garden and all those things is really saying is that there's a being coming. There's something different about this than like we started as little monkeys and then we grew into something else, which is the evolutionary story. There's like something else going on here. And within that within that whole process, there was gradually this messaging of this new possibility or different possibility of awakening. And we can see masters like Enoch in the Bible, essentially putting down a big foundational step to this. And then we can see other masters. We can see Melchizedek a couple thousand years before Jesus. And finally, we see the prophets talking about the coming of the Messiah. We hear Isaiah, we hear Jeremiah. And then finally, John the Baptist shows up, and then here he is. He shows up as now, of course, by then, because they've been talking about it for a long time, and by the time he shows up, well, lo and behold, the Jewish people are no longer sort of in charge of their own affairs in their country. It's been, the Babylonians have come and taken 10 tribes away, and they've been conquered, and the Greeks conquered them, and then the Hasmoneans conquered them, and then, of course, the Romans. And so it naturally translates to people that this Messiah will show up to, in a sense, give them the life they want and take away that they see keeps them from that life. And so the whole storyline of it. And so anyway, all of these things make it about him as the way, but what he's really saying is that he came in as a central figure in the opening up to this other option where the karma could be worked under grace. What that really means is the working of your karma rather than eye for an eye. It's all about, are you learning? And if you are learning, and what is the fundamental learning more than anything else? The learning to be able to learn from the experience and to make choices from your loving rather than simple from the impulsive reactions of your biology, your lower chakras, however you want to define it. And so that shift where we can come to this higher learning and realize, no, though by an eye for an eye approach of the world, I got the power now, so I could take what I want. I could kill you. I could enslave you. Something in me is going to pass because I know that's not in line with who I really am. So the learning is taking place. When the learning is taking place, that opens the door for forgiveness and grace, and the karma gets pulled away and doesn't have to be done an eye for an eye. The karma will still get balanced, but it'll get balanced in our dreams. It'll get balanced by us serving. It'll get balanced It's like God will say, no, we'll balance the books, but we're not going to do it that way because that just hasn't been working. And so when that real statement of I am the way, truth and light is really called, no, the way to get what you really want is this way of forgiveness, this way he really talked about. If you really look at his quote commandments, he was like, love one another as I have loved you. God will know you're my disciples. Love God with your mind, body, mind, and soul, and your neighbor as yourself. Judge not, lest you be judged. There's probably some other one in there, but not much. He didn't lay down a lot of shoulds. He was just talking about that. Love, love, love. If he said, Master, should we forgive 7 times? And he said 7 times 70. He was basically saying it wasn't, oh, you need to forgive 490 times. He's saying you forgive till it's forgiven. He was bringing a totally revolutionary approach to this experience and to the karma. And that's what that really is about. When he says, I am the way, he's really just saying this that was brought forward by God, by the Father, to use his term, through the works of many through time that had a culmination where it really became really available through him and what he did. And the whole action of him being, becoming the sacrifice, the Passover lamb, that whole thing of one for the sins of the many. He played that out because that was the tradition that was there. And he played it out in a sense to flip that karma of an eye for an eye off the burden of the people, like the yoke that was binding mankind. And what he did more than anything else, did it automatically mean everybody else would automatically choose the higher way? No, because they still had choice. But he opened that possibility in a way it was not. It's not that nobody ever got into it, but you had to be just an extraordinary master to get into it. You literally had to. It was so hard to do. Nobody was doing it really. So I am the way, truth, light is really just saying, God, the way of loving, is the truth and the light. And that's what he was an embodiment. He was embodiment of the way of loving. Look at the things he said. Turn the other cheek. Forgive 7 times 70. On the cross, they're crucifying him. He's saying, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. This is an exampleship of extraordinary love and forgiveness. And that was really the messaging that to our world, the more and more we can come into the knowing of that and the remembrance of that, and then the application of that in our lives, the more for us as individuals and us as a planet can transform into more of that world we like it to be. So I don't know if that answers it for you, but that's the answer I heard.
Okay, thank you. I'll kind of sit with that. It's always weird for me when I do meet people and they tell me, oh, this is the only way for salvation. This is the only way that you're
Yeah,
gonna
I don't,
attain
but
this
I
or
don't,
that.
but it's not, the only way is not confess the name of him. That's all. It's about only way you're going to get it is to be loving. That's what it really is saying. The way it is the way of love. Is the way
Yeah,
of
it's more about
loving.
the teaching.
The teaching was fundamentally about love and how he demonstrated the choice to love and forgive. And so it's really about that is the way to um, the awakening and the freedom that he was demonstrated, but also that he was offering. That's really it. It's not about some dogma or some church. I mean, I'm not saying there's nothing good in some of that, but there's a lot of other things got thrown in there too. And there's a lot of beautiful things in the Quran, beautiful statements. Some of it is like, oh, I mean, it's just so right on. And then they throw in other stuff, convert by the sword. And you go, but is that any different than the Crusaders? No, it's what it's what the lesser nature of human conscious will fall into or be tricked into and then manifest.
Thank you.
Bless you, my friend. Thank you.
You too.
All right. Oops. I just did what I'm not supposed to do. I knocked it. All right. Let's do Eric.
Hi, Michael. Thank you.
Hello, Eric.
Thank you so very much for doing these Wednesday night sessions. I benefited a lot from them. My question is, if you consider that in fact there is national and global karma playing out on the planet, is there anything to be said about it that can benefit our practice of soul transcendence and our functioning at the physical level?
Whenever we define ourselves within a karmic field, now karmic fields are anywhere we have identification, you find a karmic field. So as an individual, you could have an identification of a karmic field with a church. You could have a karmic field because you might identify with a gender. You might identify with a race. You might identify with the state you live in or the country you live in. You might identify with your favorite football team or a band you like. You might identify with a group of people you serve together with. All of those, a karmic field is created whenever there's that sense of identification, that sense of I'm part of this. In a sense, the primary thing that defines us and confines us individually is because we identify with the form. We identify with the body, and then we identify with the thoughts and the feelings and the fantasies that we have, and then we identify with the storyline that plays out when we take action. And so all those things are what bind us to the karma of individuation. So whenever we're looking at something, so we may say, well, but I really care about this planet, and I care about what's going on, and I see things going on. I see things going on in Israel. I think things going on politically in the United States. I see what's going on in Ukraine. And of course, because we're identified with it, it hits us emotionally, mentally, we go into trauma around it. And of course, it's now the worst ever, forgetting that, you know, what was the thing I was reading about? In the 19th century, there was a study done, and they figured out on the no, not the in the 20th century, no, then not the 19th century, the 20th century, which would have been the 1900s. They figured out that 175 million people had died in wars. So if you go, well, wait a minute, wow. You think, how could they be? Well, just the Russians lost 20, 25 million just by themselves in World War II, let alone the Germans and this and the Chinese and Maoist revolution. The estimates are about 60 million people. So you start going, no, you start getting those kind of numbers. It adds up. So you start going, wow, this isn't new. This is kind of another version of the same storyline. And so because we have physicality, there'll be relevance to us because it could affect us individually. It could affect this planet that we live on. And all of that has a kind of truth to it. But we can also be deceived if we start to relate to that as the truth rather than, let's call it, an aspect of the truth. The greater truth is that God's set this up and God's allowing this all to play out. And this is a school, and that's why we came here and to go through this. And souls line up to get onto this planet because it's so challenging. Therefore, the growth is so rapid. a lot of other worlds out there in this massive universe where life is going on. And it's most of those are a lot easier. Those are often called the warm-up worlds. You go there, you first come out of spirit because you're getting used to this whole thing. When you float around, it's really novel and great, and 5,000 years passed, but you don't learn much. So you got to be kind of advanced to get down here anyway. But advanced is relative. You might be advanced enough to get down here, but not advanced enough to not get controlled by the whole momentum of it. And so we're seeing a lot of that. And we're going to both be affected by that. And we have to have a level of connection to it where it can affect us for us then to have an effect upon it. We have to be interconnected enough so that we can feel the suffering, feel the confusion, feel the dilemma that are produced in people with what's going on, but also have a connection back to that source, which is beyond all of it, which is allowing it and in a strange way promoting it all. It's promoting it all because it's part of a grander design it has about how souls are going to come here and they're going to learn and work out things they have and that serve the greater purpose of God. And so the big key there is to get into that overview while you have the simultaneous thing. For example, there's nobody on the Gaza Strip who doesn't have karma to be on the Gaza Strip. It's not like somebody said, so they're a kid on Gaza. No, I was supposed to be in a penthouse in Manhattan. Somehow I ended up in Gaza. That isn't how it works. You go, yeah, but it's terrible. Yeah, but there's a lot of the planet that's still doing their karma an eye for an eye. There's a lot of people that participated in other lifetimes in the sacking and sieging of cities, that participated in um, being part of armies that conquered and killed and butchered and raped. And I mean, there's a whole lot of things out there in the ledger of an eye for an eye. And just because we have this greater opportunity to do the karma without having to be held to the eye for an eye, that doesn't mean mankind is choosing it now. More people are. More people are learning that turn the other cheek, but there's still a lot of the other still going on. And yet we can see differences here, even in terms of the world reaction to things like um, what's happening in Gaza. There's a world outrage about all those people being killed, just as there was a world outrage about what was done to, the concert goers and the kibitz people. I mean, there's a world outrage. There's more and more the world is getting outraged against this kind of behavior. Now, of course, even as the world is outraged, the manipulators are jumping in to turn everything to their advantage, which is one of the reasons we have this problem that we're still caught in an eye for an eye. But the world is trending in a better direction because we have so much visibility on it because of the news and everything else. We're tend to seeing it as getting worse. But this isn't getting worse. When the Turks murdered 1.5 million Armenians, nobody was even talking about it all around the world. It's 100 years later from people are trying talking about it, but people knew about it. Nobody was talking about it. I mean, nobody's really talking about the Holocaust until the World War II ended. Then finally there was whispers. Then we were talking about it. Part of the reason we're getting real time. And so now people are, and it's rightfully offending people and pushing on them, called "This is not the world we want. How do we change this?" The conundrum is there's all these karmic flows and all these people caught in their own version of eye for an eye that make it difficult for the larger consensus that's forming of we need to change the nature of how this works to really come into effect. But it is in a strange way getting better. It's just not it's not well yet. It's like you're getting better from a terrible sickness, but it's still a lot of sickness. But it's actually getting better just because all the conversations we're having. I mean, just think things have gone on in the last 100 years that, I mean, they're just terrible, terrible things have gone on. Now They started a genocide started to happen in Serbia, Bosnia, that Croatia area, and the UN came in and brought troops and stopped the genocide. In was it Ethiopia, Somalia, I think it was. They started having they were starving. One of the warlords was starving the people. This was going to be a genocide of hundreds of thousands of people. The UN, United Nations, sending troops to make sure that people got fed. Is that where we need to get to? No, it's a step in the right direction. It's a step in the right direction. The world's come a long way. In the potato famine or whatever in Ireland in the 1840s, about 2 million people starved to death. Well, England from Ireland, I've been across that channel. You take the ferry ride, it takes maybe 3 hours, 3 hours. So they knew about what's going on. When the Native American populace of the United States was being slaughtered and massacred, they knew what was going on, and they allowed it. We're actually in a time of greater awakening where there's a lot of resistance to this business as usual. We're just going to allow it. And again, it's complicated because somebody wants to turn it into their version of an eye for an eye. Well, they did this, so this should happen to them. And mankind is getting an opportunity to rise beyond that and above that. And it's taken its time, but compared to how it's been in the past, it's actually moving pretty fast. So if you look at it like that, keep sending light, keep praying. If you have ways to have influence in that direction, you do it. But it's not all off track. It's right on track. Bless you, Eric.
Thank you. Bless you too.
All right. Jan. Hello, Jan.
Michael, nice seeing you again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a long time.
It has been. Really appreciate you doing the programs too.
Yeah.
So I've got a question about like information I'd heard from you some years ago about remembrance, and I'm not sure if I have it right. This is like about the physical manifestations. If I remember, as we are coming into remembrance, we might feel something like we're being pulled apart, we're going crazy, or might start crying, or
You might have all those things because there's a pushback. First, your ego is going to fight. Your ego is your sense of separate existence. So it's going to fight against you coming into the remembrance of yourself as not being this and not being this separate being, but actually being not physical, but being consciousness itself. And not only a consciousness like a ghost drifting around, but a consciousness that's connected to all other consciousness. It's going to fight that. And so your ego will fight that. And beyond the ego fighting, and as you start to really get free and break free, there'll be a level in the unconscious that will fight it. And I will describe this as that within the deep unconscious, there is in a sense, it's like the term I got. This is something I looked at with my teacher, John Roger, many, many years ago in my work with him. We looked at a lot of stuff that I didn't talk about because I maybe talked about a little bit here and there, but not much because it was really very, very advanced and a lot of stuff, a lot to do with a different level of working with consciousness. And we came to see that there is a kind of an ego that we have, which from the very moment we enter into the experience of time and space, all through time and space, it has a continuity, has a sense of individuality. It's like the sense of individual existence into time and space and through time and space. So that could be depending on the ancientness of your story could be a very long time. You mean billions of years? Yeah, maybe even more than that. And so this then, the name for it that he came up, because we were like, what do we call this? He said, let's call it the soulic ego. So I go, okay, we'll call it. So that's what I've always called it, because that was what he came up with, the soulic ego. Now, he didn't talk about this. I remember I mentioned to one person, and they tried to ask him a question about it at a seminar, and he wouldn't answer it, which told me at that time, that was a mistake. I told this person about it. I told him not to talk about it, and they immediately brought it up to him. So he didn't have it. He basically wasn't willing to talk about it then, because I don't think it was time. But now it is time, because people are pushing the envelope of truly awakening to who they are. And what happens is your individual ego of this life will fight it, but you'll sort of get beyond that. And then you start to push up an awakening. First, there's the soul transcendence that you know about through your studies with MSA, which is you're coming awake to the reality of yourself, the soul, past the astral dimension of consciousness, and the causal or emotional dimension, the mental dimension, the etheric or unconscious dimension, and back into what we would call the soul realm, which is a state which is beyond time and space. And so now you're connecting back to the truth of yourself as a soul. However, there are other dimensions of God's reality that go beyond that soul realm, higher than that. John Roger talked about 27 levels above that, that the conscious you could go into, that you could awaken to. And so as you start to come awake, let's say soulic, and you start to come awake in these other dimensions, these other levels, as you start to get more awakened at some point, you start to actually awaken beyond the reality of yourself as a soul, and you start to awaken to the truth that truly you are spirit, that the true nature of you is spirit, and that to serve the purpose of God, you as spirit was channeled into or intended into what we would call the soul, the soulic form. So for example, as a soul, when you come fully awake to yourself as soul, you realize your oneness with all other souls. But if you were to come awake to yourself as spirit, you'd realize your oneness with all of spirit, which is all that is. So it's a higher state. And the awakening process and coming into the awareness of ourselves as soul is essential, because that's this huge transition that changes the dimension of us being caught in the time-space karma in the normal sense. But if you're ready for it spiritually, you'll start to come awake even beyond that. And when you start to come awake beyond that, you get pushed back out of this soulic ego. It pushes back, and it's very powerful. And could it make you feel crazy? Yeah, but it could also be you'll have this huge breakthrough. And this has happened to me a lot. This huge breakthrough. I say, oh my God, I got so much new awareness. This is amazing. Oh my God, I got to work on this. That what amazing insightfulness. And I'm thinking, I can't wait till I can sit down and do SEs and focus on this again. The next thing you know, 3 weeks have passed, and I haven't focused on it for one instant. And all of a sudden I go, oh, what happened? That soulic ego and the unconscious push back. And what it does, because it has access to all the remembrance of all the experiences, it just pulled something out of the unconscious that was particularly traumatic or particularly limiting, and created a fear in the unconscious that kind of stopped me temporarily. And this went on with me for a number of years, where I kept pushing the envelope. I get up to another level of those dimensions above soul, and I'd be just cruising. All of a sudden, what just happened? I was all about this, and suddenly I hadn't even thought of it. But eventually something would push on me again, it would come back, and then I would be ready for the next level. And so it's kind of like understanding there is a call from God to bring all parts of itself back to itself. So for all this, not one soul be lost, which means all the souls will be brought in back into the truth of their spirit. But then there will be those essences of the spirit itself that will even move even more completely into the wholeness of God if they're ready. Eventually God will call all of itself back to itself so that all of itself will know fully itself. So this is the divine destiny of all beingness. So you can have all sorts of things go on the way to it, including feeling crazy, feeling pulled about, feeling it's too much. And those are really difficult. But the ones to me that are almost not necessarily worse, but harder to deal with, the ones where you suddenly are blank and you can't focus on spirit. It's the weirdest thing. And yet you don't even know you're not doing it till all of a sudden, eventually the thing moves inside and you go, wait a minute, I'm blocking the spirit. What's going on? And for me, it would be like, oh, ready for another level? Oh, why wasn't I trying to do this every day? I wasn't, and I would still meditate like I would do my spiritual exercises is just because I always did them, but I wasn't doing it with the same intent. And the intent is so powerful. It was unconsciously, I was in resistance and limitation. So that's what is going on. That's my story. I'm sticking to it until I get a better one. But so far, everything keeps clarifying for me that this is a good understanding of how it works. And I'm open to be wrong and to learn because there's a lot I know now that I didn't know consciously before. But the funny thing is when I came to the knowing of all this, it was really like I remembered it. And coming into that remembrance was like nothing else for me. So you've had a challenging path, and a lot of it for you is understanding that, and for a lot of people, I'll share this because this applies to a lot of people. There's a process we'll go through sort of on the way into what I'm talking about, where we'll go through a process we could call dying to the world. And dying to the world is a process where this world that we're bound to by our attraction to, see, karma is what attracts. But what'll happen is the attraction to this will just start to leave us. And when we're dying to it, just means our concern about it, our care for it, our attachment to it will just start to leave us. And we'll be just more and more just whatever. We'll be living, we'll have preference still. But it'll be like, well, I really like that, but well, how bad do you want it? Well, it's okay if I don't get it, but I'd like it. So you'd still prefer, you know, to sleep in a comfortable bed. You'd rather not be too cold or too hot. You still like that. But your ability to just kind of go, well, whatever, will increase. And it actually increases because you're less and less identified with this and more coming into the remembrance of the reality you truly exist in. Not only the reality you truly come from, but the reality you truly exist in all the time is a spiritual one where none of this really matters. And that will also create some challenge because the ego doesn't like that. But you keep hanging in there, you keep breathing, you keep lifting, you keep listening, you keep loving, you keep chanting, you keep exploring the teachings, and the transcendence keeps happening. The different karmas that people bring to the dance are just all so different. All so different. For some people, it's like they seem like it's pretty easy. Other people, it seems really hard. But what I found is it's more the case of the hard stuff for some people is over here, and for other people, the hard stuff's over here. But everybody's got some hard stuff. On occasion, you meet somebody go, God, it seems so easy for them, relative. Well, you didn't see their last life. And you go, oh my God, how did they do that? Somehow they did. And so, yeah, maybe their ride's a little easier this time. But in the scope of things, everybody's going to be challenged. But understand, not that we want to look or seek to suffer, but understand we suffer what this world does to us. And we suffer what the world does to us until we come to this place where we realize the greater suffering is not what this world is doing to us. The greater suffering is our attachment and identification with this world. And that's where the dying to the world happens. And then we really realize that's when you really launch. And so you're kind of in that process. So just keep going. You're on your way home.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, bless you. And thank you for your question. And
Thank
thank you all. All right, we're going to close with a little blessing and we'll call it a night. So, dearest Lord, thank you for your support, your love and guidance. Thank you for working with us. Thank you for shielding us from those distractions that would turn our attention back into the glamour and to the hungers of life. Help us to recognize those are not an evil thing, but that we can choose differently. Those can be no longer the things that dominate our focus. Help us to realize that you're with us always, anchoring in us and through us this greater remembrance and this greater truth. But the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and the blessings already are and always are. Help us to share this joy and this truth, not simply in our words, but by how we live. Help our lives be a demonstration of this truth and the fullness of your manifestation living in us and through us and for us all. Give us this day our daily bread, but let our daily bread not simply be that we would consume in our bodies, but the manna from heaven. Let that be the daily bread, which is that reactivates us and restores us to the holiness of God and our oneness with that holiness. We thank you. We surrender to you and to your purpose for us. May thy will be done now and always. Amen. And be rich by Shem.
God bless you, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Michael.
Michael.
Always
Good
such
night.
a
Thank
wholesome.
you.
Bless you,
God
Michael.
bless
Good
you. I
night,
love
everybody.
you.
That's
you.
wonderful and
you.
awesome.
Bless everybody. Thank you.
Thank you,
May
Michael.
Ruth
Thank
see you
you.
again.
Thank you, Michael.
Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Bless you.
God bless
Thank you,
you.
Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank
These
you.
are all people who are listening, right?
Thank
Right.
you, everyone.
Howdy.
Thank you. God bless.
You give me SC's
Thank you.